My name is Jasmine Fitzgerald. I'm 31 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother raised her glass in front of 14 people, family, neighbors, friends from church, and said, "One daughter is a doctor. The other one, well, she cleans houses for a living." Everyone laughed. My sister smiled. My father looked at his plate. I didn't say a word. I just kept refilling water glasses, because that's what they expected me to do. What they didn't know was that 3 weeks later, they'd be sitting in a ballroom with 600 people, watching me walk across a stage to accept an award they couldn't even pronounce. And the company I built, the one they knew nothing about, had been serving their favorite resort for 2 years. They just never thought to ask whose name was on the contract. This is that story. To understand what happened at that Thanksgiving table, you need to understand the Fitzgerald family. We lived in Arcadia, a neighborhood in Phoenix where the lawns were always green and the garages always held 2 cars. My parents bought that house in 1998, the year I turned 4. 4 bedrooms, a pool in the backyard, the kind of place where you hosted barbecues and pretended everything was fine. My mother, Lorraine, was 58 years old. She'd been an elementary school teacher for 22 years before retiring. She believed in 3 things: God, appearances, and her eldest daughter. My father, Gerald, was 62. He'd spent his career as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Phoenix. He was a quiet man, the kind of quiet that people mistake for wisdom, but is really just avoidance. His favorite phrase was, "Your mother just wants what's best for you, Jasmine. You know how she is." That was his answer to everything, every slight, every comparison. Every time I was made to feel like I didn't belong at my own dinner table. And then there was Vivian. Dr. Vivian Fitzgerald Caldwell, 34 years old, board-certified dermatologist specializing in cosmetic procedures. She ran a practice called Scottsdale Dermatology and Aesthetics with 3 other physicians. Her husband, Bradley, was a real estate attorney at his own firm, Caldwell and Associates. They had 2 children, Ethan, 5, and Lily, 3. They lived in a 5,000-square-foot house in North Scottsdale with a 3-car garage and a pool that was heated year-round. My mother posted about Vivian on Facebook an average of 4 times a week. Photos from charity galas, updates about the grandchildren, humble brags about Vivian's latest Botox innovation or Bradley's newest real estate deal. Her Facebook bio read, "Proud mother of Dr. Vivian Fitzgerald Caldwell." That was it. Just Vivian, as if she only had one daughter. I used to scroll through my mother's profile late at night, looking for myself. I found one photo in 3 years. It was from Easter 2023. I was in the background, slightly out of focus, carrying a casserole dish to the table. She hadn't even tagged me. In the living room of my parents' house, there was a wall. The family wall, my mother called it. 12 framed photographs arranged in a perfect grid. Vivian's wedding, Vivian's medical school graduation, Vivian holding Ethan for the first time, Vivian and Bradley at some gala, her in a red dress, him in a tuxedo. I counted once. Vivian appeared in 11 of those 12 photos. I was in one. My high school graduation. I was standing between my parents, wearing a cap and gown, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That photo was in the bottom corner, partially hidden by a decorative plant. Growing up, I was always Vivian's little sister. Never just Jasmine. Teachers would light up when they saw my last name on their roster. "Oh, are you related to Vivian Fitzgerald? She was such a wonderful student." And then their faces would fall, just slightly, when they realized I wasn't going to be wonderful in quite the same way. I was a good student, B+ average, honor roll, but not valedictorian. I played softball for 2 years before quitting. I was in the drama club but never got the lead. I was fine, average, forgettable. And in a family that worshipped excellence, forgettable was the same as failure. When Vivian graduated from medical school, my parents threw a party for 60 people. They rented out a restaurant. There was a live band. My mother gave a speech that lasted 12 minutes and made 3 people cry. When I got my CNA certification at 22, my mother said, "That's nice, honey. Can you pass the salad?" No party. No speech. Just salad. When Vivian bought her first house, my parents gave her $30,000 for the down payment. When I moved into my first apartment, a 1-bedroom in Tempe with bars on the windows, my mother asked if I really needed to live alone. Wouldn't it be cheaper to stay home? When Vivian announced her engagement to Bradley, my mother cried tears of joy for 20 minutes. When I brought home my first serious boyfriend, she asked him what he did for work, then spent the rest of dinner explaining how Bradley had just made partner. The message was clear. It was always clear. There was Vivian. And then, there was everyone else. For 5 years, I worked at Scottsdale Dermatology and Aesthetics, Vivian's practice. It started as a favor. At least, that's how she framed it. I had just gotten my certification as a medical assistant. I was 22, eager to prove myself, desperate to find my place in a family that never seemed to have room for me. Vivian called me one afternoon in March 2016. "There's an opening at the practice. Front desk and patient intake. I told the office manager you might be interested." I should have heard the warning in her voice, that slight edge beneath the generosity. But I was young. I was hopeful. I thought maybe this was her way of reaching out, of finally seeing me as something other than a burden. "I'm doing this as a favor, Jazz," she said before I started. "Don't make me regret it." I didn't. For 5 years, I didn't. I arrived early, I stayed late. I learned the names of every patient, memorized their allergies, remembered their children's birthdays. I was the one who calmed anxious patients before procedures. I was the one who stayed until 9 p.m. reorganizing the supply closet because no one else wanted to do it. I never called in sick. I never complained. I never once mentioned to anyone that my sister was one of the physicians. I wanted to earn my place. I wanted them to see me as Jasmine, not as Vivian's little sister. And for 5 years, I thought it was working. Then came March 15th, 2021. A Monday, 9:47 a.m. I was called into the office of Sandra Whitfield, the practice manager. She was sitting behind her desk with a folder in front of her and a look on her face that I'd never seen before. "Jasmine, please sit down." I sat. "We've received some concerns about your performance. Multiple concerns. I'm sorry, but we have to let you go, effective immediately." The room tilted. "Concerns?" I managed. "What concerns? From who?" Sandra's eyes flickered toward the wall, toward the door, toward anywhere but my face. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but the decision has been made. HR will process your final paycheck. You have 20 minutes to collect your belongings." 20 minutes. 5 years of my life. Perfect attendance. Not a single complaint in my file. And I was being escorted out the back door in 20 minutes. I packed my things in a cardboard box, a framed photo of my parents, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest employee," a small succulent I'd kept on my desk for 3 years. As I walked down the hallway toward the exit, I passed Vivian's office. The door was open. She was on the phone, laughing at something, her chair turned toward the window. She didn't look up. She didn't even turn around. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call. It was from Heather, the receptionist. We'd worked together for 4 years. She was the closest thing I had to a friend at that practice. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." "Knew what?" Silence. Then, "It was Vivian. She went to Sandra. She said you were a liability. She said you made patients uncomfortable. She said you had attitude problems and that it was affecting the practice's reputation." I couldn't speak. None of it was true, Jasmine. Everyone knows that. But Sandra, she wasn't going to argue with a physician, especially not one of the partners. The call lasted 11 minutes. I remember because I was staring at my phone the entire time, watching the seconds tick by, feeling something inside me harden with each one. After Heather hung up, I sat in my car in the Walmart parking lot for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand how my own sister could do this to me. I had $3,200 in debt, no job, no references I could use, and no explanation I could give to my parents that wouldn't sound like I was attacking their golden child. So I didn't tell them. I told them I left because I wanted a change, because I was burned out, because I needed to find myself. My mother sighed and said, "Well, I hope you find something soon. It's embarrassing when people ask what you do." I found something, but not in the way anyone expected. That night, I called the only person I thought might understand. Not my mother, not my father, not any of my friends who would tell me to confront Vivian, to make a scene, to fight back. I called Aunt Marlene. Marlene was my father's younger sister, 59 years old, divorced twice. She'd been a hairdresser for 30 years, working out of a small salon in Mesa called Bella Vita. In the Fitzgerald family, she was the cautionary tale, the one my mother referenced when she wanted to scare us into achievement. You don't want to end up like your Aunt Marlene, do you? But Marlene was the only one who ever asked me how I was doing without waiting for an answer she wanted to hear. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Jasmine? Honey, what's wrong?" I told her everything. The firing, Heather's call, the realization that my own sister had sabotaged my career to protect her precious reputation. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Marlene said, "Honey, I've been the family disappointment for 30 years. You want my advice? Don't give them the satisfaction of watching you bleed. And don't give them the satisfaction of watching you heal either. Just live, quietly. And one day, they'll see." They'll see what? Everything they missed. That was the day I stopped being Vivian's sister, and the day I started becoming someone else entirely. After I got fired, I had to pay rent. I had $3,200 in debt, no job prospects, and a family that thought I was a failure. So I did what anyone in my position would do. I started cleaning houses. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what I'd imagined for myself at 27 years old. But a friend of a friend knew someone in Paradise Valley who needed help, and I needed money. Her name was Mrs. Pemberton, 73 years old, a widow who lived alone in a 6,000 square foot house with more rooms than she could count. She paid $150 per session, cash, every Tuesday and Friday. For the first few months, I just cleaned, scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, organized closets. It was mindless work, but there was something almost meditative about it. No one was watching. No one was judging. I could disappear into the rhythm of it and forget, for a few hours, that my life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. But then I started noticing things. Mrs. Pemberton's house was spotless, but her life was chaos. Unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter. A broken garage door she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. A refrigerator full of expired food because she couldn't remember what she'd bought. One day, without being asked, I organized her bills into folders by due date. I called a handyman to fix the garage door. I cleaned out her refrigerator and made a grocery list. She cried. "No one has ever done this for me," she said. "Not even my own children." That was when I realized something. Rich people don't just want clean. They want invisible. They want someone who sees everything and says nothing. Someone who can make their lives easier without ever making them feel dependent. They want control without the effort of controlling, and I could give them that. On September 12, 2022, I filed the paperwork for Pristine Concierge LLC. The filing fee was $50. The woman at the counter asked what we did. "We make rich people's lives easier," I said. She laughed. I didn't. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days. I hired 2 employees, Maria, a housekeeper I'd met through Mrs. Pemberton, and Daniel, a driver who was between jobs. We took every client we could get: estate management, home organization, personal shopping, errand running. If it made someone's life easier and they could pay for it, we did it. By the end of 2022, we had 12 clients. Revenue, $4,200 a month, barely enough to cover payroll and keep the lights on. I almost quit 3 times. But then, in April 2023, everything changed. I got an email from a woman named Victoria Ashford. Victoria was 62 years old, a widow, like Mrs. Pemberton. But unlike Mrs. Pemberton, Victoria owned a 120-room luxury resort in Paradise Valley called the Mirada. Room rates started at $800 a night and went up to $3,000 for the presidential suite. Her previous housekeeping contractor had been caught in a scandal: employees stealing from guests, shoddy work covered up with bribes. Victoria needed a new vendor, someone discreet, someone trustworthy, someone who understood that in the luxury hospitality business, reputation is everything. One of my clients had mentioned my name. I met Victoria in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. She sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, studying me with eyes that missed nothing. "Everyone promises discretion," she said. "What makes you different?" I thought about Vivian, about my mother, about all the years I'd spent being invisible in my own family. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Mrs. Ashford. I know how to make other people feel seen while staying unseen myself." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she slid a contract across the desk. $28,000 a month, 18-month term. "Can you handle it?" I said yes. I had no idea if I could handle it, but I figured it out. I hired 8 more employees. I created training protocols. I implemented quality control systems I'd learned from YouTube videos and business books I'd checked out from the library. And it worked. Victoria signed a second contract. Then she introduced me to her friends, the owners of Desert Sage Resort and Copper Canyon Lodge. By the end of 2024, I had contracts with all 3. By November 2025, Pristine Concierge had 38 employees, 28 full-time, 10 part-time. We operated out of a 1,200-square-foot office in Scottsdale Air Park. Our gross revenue for the year was on track to hit $1.9 million. I drove a 2019 Honda Civic. I wore jeans and plain sweaters. I lived in a modest apartment in Old Town Scottsdale. And when my mother asked what I did for work, I said, "Just cleaning, Mom." Same as always. She never asked follow-up questions. None of them did. I built an empire, and I built it in silence. There was only one person who knew the truth. In June 2024, I got a phone call from Aunt Marlene. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Honey," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My stomach dropped. Okay. I had a client in my chair today. Mrs. Thornberry, lives in Paradise Valley. She spent the whole appointment talking about this concierge company she uses. Said they're the best she's ever worked with. Discreet, professional, life-changing. I held my breath. She mentioned the owner's name, Jasmine Fitzgerald. Silence. "That's you, isn't it?" I didn't answer. "Honey, I almost dropped my scissors. I had to pretend I was adjusting the cape." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Please don't tell anyone. Please. I'm not ready." "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice softened. I didn't say a word. And I won't. But Jasmine, I need you to know, I'm so proud of you, and I understand why you're hiding it. I've been hiding from this family for 30 years. We talked for another hour. I told her about Pristine Concierge, about Victoria, about the contracts and the employees, and the sleepless nights wondering if it would all fall apart. She listened. She didn't judge. She didn't ask why I hadn't told my parents or tried to rub it in Vivian's face. She just said, "One day they'll see." That was her phrase. Her promise. One day they'll see. I just didn't know that one day was coming faster than either of us expected. If you've ever had a family member make you feel invisible, someone who looked right through you like you didn't matter, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to see what happened next. November 27th, 2025. Thursday, Thanksgiving. I drove from Scottsdale to Arcadia in 22 minutes. I was wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and boots I'd bought 3 years ago. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would raise questions. I brought a bottle of wine, $40, a 2019 Napa Cabernet that I'd read good reviews about. I knew my mother would put it on the counter and never mention it. She'd serve the wine Vivian brought instead. Probably something twice as expensive, presented with a little speech about the vineyard. I parked at the end of the driveway. That's where I always parked. The good spots. The ones closest to the house. Shaded by the bougainvillea my mother spent $300 a year maintaining, were reserved for Vivian's white Lexus and Bradley's black BMW. I'd been parking at the end for as long as I could remember. When I walked through the front door at 4:15 p.m., the house was already full. I could hear laughter from the living room, the clink of glasses. My mother's voice, high and animated, telling some story I'd probably heard a dozen times. I found her in the kitchen. "Oh, Jasmine, you're here." She glanced at me for half a second, then turned back to the stove. "Good. Can you help me with the gravy? It's starting to lump." No hug. No, "How are you?" No, "I'm glad you made it." Just gravy. I stirred the gravy. The guest list that year was 14 people. My parents, Vivian and Bradley, Ethan and Lily, who were running around the backyard screaming about something, my Aunt Colleen, my mother's younger sister, and her husband, Uncle Pete. 2 women from my mother's church, Judith and Dorothy, both in their 60s, both wearing cardigans and pearls. The Mercers, the couple who lived next door. He was a retired dentist. She was a retired school principal. And finally, Dr. Stephanie Brennan, one of Vivian's colleagues from the hospital. 14 people. I knew most of them. I'd seen them at other family functions. They'd watched me grow up, watched me fade into the background, watched me become the sister who wasn't Vivian. None of them knew who I really was. And I intended to keep it that way. For the first 2 hours, I was a ghost. I refilled water pitchers. I cleared appetizer plates. I checked on the turkey. I arranged the silverware because my mother said I'd done it wrong the first time. 4 tasks in 2 hours. 4 requests to serve, to help, to disappear into usefulness. Not once did anyone ask me to sit down. At one point, I was passing through the living room with a tray of crackers when Vivian's son, Ethan, tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Jasmine?" "Yes, sweetie? Why are you always in the kitchen?" Before I could answer, Vivian laughed from across the room. "Because that's where she belongs, sweetie." She said it lightly, playfully, like it was a joke. But I saw Aunt Colleen's face, just for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been discomfort. Then it was gone, and the party continued. At 6:47 p.m. Huesati, we sat down to dinner. The table was set beautifully. White tablecloth, cloth napkins folded into fans, my mother's wedding china, 14 place settings arranged with geometric precision. My seat was at the end, near the kitchen door, in case anyone needed anything. My mother stood at the head of the table, a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and pearl earrings. Her hair had been done that morning. I knew because she'd mentioned it 3 times. "Before we eat," she said, "I want to say a few words." The room went quiet. I want to thank God for this beautiful family, for my wonderful husband Gerald, who has stood by me for 36 years. She smiled at my father. He nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. For my grandchildren, Ethan and Lily, who bring so much joy into our lives, the children giggled. For my son-in-law Bradley, who takes such good care of our Vivian. Bradley raised his glass, and especially for my daughter Vivian, a doctor, a mother, a blessing. She paused. Let the moment breathe. I felt something cold settling in my chest. I knew what was coming. I'd felt it building all afternoon, all year, all my life. "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, Vivian. We all are." Vivian smiled. That perfect practiced smile. The smile she used for patience, for photos, for moments when she knew everyone was watching. My mother turned. Her eyes found me. And of course, for Jasmine. Another pause. Different this time. Heavy. "I have 2 daughters. One is a doctor." She gestured toward Vivian with her wine glass. "The other one, well," she laughed. A light, tinkling laugh that invited everyone else to laugh along. "She cleans houses for a living, but at least she's good at it." 14 people laughed. I counted. Judith and Dorothy laughed. Uncle Pete laughed. Bradley laughed. Mr. Mercer laughed. Dr. Stephanie Brennan laughed. Vivian laughed loudest of all. My father didn't laugh. He looked down at his plate. Mrs. Mercer didn't laugh. She pressed her lips together and stared at her napkin. But everyone else laughed. And my mother kept smiling, pleased with herself, pleased with her clever little joke at my expense. I felt the room shrinking around me, the laughter pressing in from all sides. 14 people who saw me as exactly what my mother had just described. The maid, the lesser daughter, the embarrassment. Something shifted inside me. I set down my water glass. I placed my napkin on the table, and I stood up. The laughter died. My mother looked at me, confused. "Jasmine? Is something wrong?" I met her eyes, held them. "Mom, I want to thank you." She blinked. "Thank me?" "For making it very clear, in front of everyone here, exactly where I stand in this family." The room was silent, completely, utterly silent. "I hope one day you remember this moment." "Because I know I will." I pushed in my chair. I picked up my purse, and I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. I was sitting in my car in the CVS parking lot 3 miles from my parents' house when my phone rang. 7:34 p.m. The name on the screen was Aunt Colleen. I almost didn't answer. I thought she was calling to tell me I'd overreacted, that I'd embarrassed my mother, that I should apologize. But something made me pick up. "Jasmine." Her voice was shaking. "I need to tell you something. I should have told you months ago." I didn't say anything. "I forwarded you an email by accident, back in August. I meant to send it to Vivian, but I clicked the wrong name. When you never responded, I thought maybe you didn't see it. Or maybe you'd forgiven us. I don't know. I told myself it didn't matter." "What email?" "Check your spam folder. The subject line is what to do about Jasmine." My hands were cold. I switched to speaker and opened my email app. Spam folder. 2,847 unread messages. I typed in the subject line. And there it was. Dated August 8th, 2025. I opened it. The email chain went back 18 months. 47 messages between my mother, my sister, and my Aunt Colleen. The first email was from April 2024. The subject line was, "What to do about Jasmine?" Email from Lorraine Fitzgerald. "Girls, I need your advice. Rachel's wedding is coming up in June, and I don't know what to do about Jasmine. I don't want her there making conversation with guests. What if someone asks what she does? I can't keep explaining away the embarrassment." Email from Vivian Caldwell. "Agreed. She'll probably show up in her cleaning uniform anyway. Just tell her it's a small ceremony, family only. She'll believe it." Email from Colleen Fitzgerald Daniels. "Are we sure about this? She's still family." Email from Lorraine Fitzgerald. "Colleen, sometimes I wish I only had one daughter. Is that terrible to say?" I stopped breathing. I read that line again. "Sometimes I wish I only had one daughter, my own mother," in writing. I kept scrolling. Email from Vivian Caldwell, June 2024. "The wedding went perfectly. Jasmine didn't even ask about it. She actually believed the intimate gathering story. God, she's so easy to manage." Email from Lorraine Fitzgerald, September 2024. "Gerald keeps saying we should invite Jasmine to Sunday dinners. I told him it's easier when it's just us and Vivian's family. She brings down the mood." Email from Vivian Caldwell, November 2024. "Speaking of bringing down the mood, Thanksgiving is coming up. Do we have to invite her this year?" Email from Lorraine Fitzgerald. "Unfortunately, yes. People will talk if we don't. But don't worry, I'll keep her busy in the kitchen." I kept scrolling. Message after message. A year and a half of my family discussing me like I was a problem to be managed, an inconvenience, a stain on the family name. And then I reached the last email in the chain. Dated November 24th, 2025, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Email from Vivian Caldwell. "Don't worry, Mom. After tomorrow, she'll know her place. I have a toast prepared." A toast prepared. She'd planned it. They'd all planned it. The "one daughter is a doctor, one is a maid" line wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't just my mother being thoughtless. It was coordinated, discussed, approved. My own family had scheduled my humiliation. I sat in that CVS parking lot for 45 minutes. I read every email twice. Then I read them again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt clear. Like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling around in my whole life. Like all the confusion, all the self-doubt, all the years of wondering if I was crazy or too sensitive or imagining things. All of it crystallized into a single, unshakable truth. They didn't just exclude me. They organized it. They documented it. They laughed about it in writing. I created a folder in my email. I named it Evidence. I forwarded all 47 emails. And then I drove home. The next morning, Friday, November 28th, 2025, I woke up to a new email, but this one wasn't from my family. It was from Victoria Ashford. Email subject: Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award. Congratulations, email body. Dear Jasmine, it is my honor to inform you that you have been selected as the recipient of this year's Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award, presented by the Southwest Business Council. The ceremony will take place on December 18th at the JW Marriott Phoenix Desert Ridge. 600 guests, local press coverage, and a speech from you. Should you choose to accept? I've watched your company grow from a single employee to an industry leader in just 3 years. You've earned this recognition, and I couldn't be more proud to have nominated you. Please let me know if you'll accept. I hope you will. With admiration, Victoria Ashford. I read the email 3 times. December 18th. 3 weeks away. 600 people. Local press. And 10 complimentary tickets. I looked at that number. 10 tickets. And I thought about the 14 people who had laughed at me the night before. I called Aunt Marlene that evening. We talked for 2 hours and 14 minutes. I told her about the email chain, about what my mother had written, about what Vivian had planned. I read her the messages, word for word, and listened to her silence on the other end. When I finished, she said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "You could expose them, you know. Send those emails to everyone, post them on Facebook. Let the whole world see who they really are." I'd thought about it. In the parking lot, in my car, in the hours since. I'd imagined it 100 different ways. Forwarding the emails to every relative I had, printing them out and mailing them to my mother's church friends. Watching the facade crumble. Watching them feel, for once, the way they'd made me feel. "And?" Marlene asked. And I realized that's what they would do. Silence. "I'm not them, Aunt Marlene. I'm not going to destroy them. I'm just going to stop hiding and let them sit with what they've done." "How?" "The award ceremony, December 18th, 600 people, press coverage. Victoria is nominating me." "Good Lord." "I'm going to invite them. All of them. Mom, Dad, Vivian, Bradley." "They'll never come." "They will. Bradley already got an invitation through one of his clients. They think it's a networking event. They don't know who's receiving the award." Another silence. Longer this time. "Jasmine, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Then I'll be there. Front row. With bells on." I smiled. For the first time in days, I actually smiled. "Thank you, Aunt Marlene." "For what?" "For seeing me, when no one else did." Over the next 3 weeks, I wrote 7 drafts of my speech. The first draft was angry. I named names. I quoted emails. I imagined standing on that stage and watching my family's faces as I read their own words back to them. The second draft was sad. I talked about childhood memories, about wanting so desperately to be loved, about the girl who spent her whole life trying to earn a place at the table. The third draft was accusatory. The fourth was self-pitying. The fifth was too long. The sixth was too short. In the seventh draft, I deleted all of it. Because I realized something. The best revenge isn't humiliation. It's becoming someone they can't ignore. I didn't need to expose them. I didn't need to quote their emails or describe their cruelty in front of 600 strangers. I just needed to stand on that stage and tell my story. My real story. The one about a woman who was fired, who started over, who built something from nothing. And let them sit in the audience and realize, slowly, painfully, publicly, that the daughter they dismissed was standing in a spotlight they could never reach. The final speech was 8 minutes long. I didn't mention my family by name. Not once. But I knew they would hear themselves in every word. December 18th arrived faster than I expected. I bought a dress. Navy blue. $340 from Nordstrom Scottsdale. It was simple. Elegant. The kind of dress that said, "I belong here," without trying too hard. Aunt Marlene came to my apartment that morning to help me get ready. She did my hair. Loose waves, pinned back on one side. Professional, confident. "You look like a CEO," she said. "I am a CEO." She smiled. "Yes, you are." At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Vivian had posted a photo. Her and Bradley, dressed in formal attire, standing in the lobby of the JW Marriott. The caption read, "Networking with my husband at a business gala. Blessed life." They were there. They had no idea. Was set for 600. I arrived at 6:30 was set for 600. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. through the speaker entrance. Victoria met me backstage wearing a silver gown and a smile that could light up a room. "Are you ready?" I looked through a gap in the curtain. The ballroom was filling up. Business leaders, local politicians, journalists with cameras, round tables draped in white cloth, each one topped with a small centerpiece of desert flowers. And there, at table 14, I almost laughed at the number, sat my parents. My mother in a burgundy dress. My father in a suit he'd probably owned for 20 years. Vivian in emerald green. Bradley in a tailored navy jacket. They were laughing, drinking champagne, completely unaware. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said. The program started at 7 p.m. There were speeches, networking awards, recognition of sponsors, a video presentation about the Southwest Business Council and their mission to support local entrepreneurs. I barely heard any of it. I was watching table 14, watching my mother lean over to whisper something to Vivian, watching Bradley check his phone under the table, watching my father look around the room with the vague discomfort of a man who knew he didn't belong here, but couldn't explain why. At 7:45 p.m., the MC, a local news anchor named James Whitman, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the highlight of tonight's program, the Arizona Rising Entrepreneur Award." The room quieted. This award recognizes an exceptional business leader who has demonstrated innovation, growth, and community impact. This year's recipient has built something truly remarkable. I felt my heart pounding. Pristine Concierge was founded just 3 years ago with one employee and a vision. Today, it employs 38 people. It serves 3 of Arizona's most prestigious luxury resorts, and this year it generated nearly $2 million in revenue. I heard a murmur ripple through the crowd. Impressed murmurs, the sound of people recognizing success. The founder of Pristine Concierge started from nothing. She faced setbacks. She faced doubt. She faced people who told her she would never amount to anything. James paused. Let the words land. Tonight, we prove them wrong. I closed my eyes, took a breath. "Please welcome to the stage, Jasmine Fitzgerald." I heard my mother gasp before I even stepped into the light. The curtain parted. The spotlight hit my face, and I walked across that stage with 600 people watching, including the 4 people who had spent my entire life wishing I didn't exist. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I reached the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, strangers mostly, but also Victoria in the front row, beaming, and Aunt Marlene beside her, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. And at table 14, 4 frozen figures. I began. "Thank you, James. And thank you to the Southwest Business Council for this incredible honor." My voice was steady, calm, the voice of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror until the words felt like breathing. "I want to tell you a story, a true story, about a woman who, 4 years ago, had nothing." I paused. In 2021, I was fired from my job. I had $3,200 in debt, no references, no backup plan. I was 27 years old, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I saw my mother shift in her seat. So I started cleaning houses, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because I needed to pay rent. Because I needed to survive. Another pause. And somewhere along the way, I discovered something. I discovered that I was good at it. Not just at cleaning, but at seeing what people needed, at making their lives easier, at being invisible in a way that made them feel visible. I let that word hang in the air. Invisible. I built Pristine Concierge with my own 2 hands. I started with 1 client, then 5, then 50. I made mistakes. I worked 18-hour days. I doubted myself more times than I can count. I looked directly at table 14. And there were people who were supposed to love me, who told me I would never amount to anything. I saw Vivian's face go pale. People who called me an embarrassment. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. People who excluded me from family events because they were ashamed to be seen with me. I saw my father close his eyes. To those people, I want to say, thank you. The room was silent. Absolutely silent. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You gave me a reason to prove you wrong. I paused. Let the moment breathe. This award isn't just for me. It's for every person who's ever been told they're not good enough. For everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. For everyone who's been made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to see them most clearly. I lifted my chin. I see you. And I want you to know. You are not your family's opinion of you. You are not the box they try to put you in. You are capable of so much more than they will ever understand. I took a breath. Thank you. The applause started slowly. One person, then 10, then 100. And then, like a wave, the entire room rose to its feet. 600 people, standing, applauding. For 47 seconds, I stood at that podium and let the sound wash over me. The sound of recognition, of validation, of everything I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. And at table 14, my family sat frozen in their seats. They didn't stand. They couldn't. After the ceremony, there was a reception. I was surrounded by people. Business leaders who wanted my card. Journalists who wanted interviews. Victoria, who hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. But I kept one eye on the door. I knew they would come. And at 8:32 p.m., my mother appeared. She was alone. Vivian and Bradley must have stayed at the table. Or maybe they'd already left. I didn't know. I didn't care. She walked toward me slowly. Her face was streaked with mascara. Her hands were shaking. Jasmine. I turned to face her. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her. At the woman who had given birth to me. Who had raised me. Who had wished, in writing, that she only had one daughter. Would you have believed me, Mom? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Would you have been proud? Or would you have found another reason to compare me to Vivian? She didn't answer. That's what I thought. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean the things I said, the emails. You meant every word. Jasmine, please. I'm not angry, Mom. She looked up, startled. I'm not angry, I repeated. I'm just done. I turned and walked away. She called after me. Jasmine, are you still going to talk to me? Are we still family? I stopped. I didn't turn around. We've always been family, Mom. You just never treated me like it. And I kept walking. In the 3 days after the gala, I received 12 missed calls from my mother. I didn't answer any of them. She left voicemails, long, rambling messages that started with apologies and ended with accusations. I'm sorry, but you have to understand how this looks. I'm sorry, but you could have told us. I'm sorry, but this is so unfair to your sister. I deleted all of them. Vivian sent me one email. The subject line was, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. I archived it and moved on. My father called once. Just once. On the 4th day. I answered. Jasmine. His voice was quiet, tired. It's Dad. I know. Silence stretched between us. The silence of 31 years of things unsaid. I'm sorry, he finally said. I should have said something. Years ago. I should have stood up for you. You should have, Dad. But you didn't. More silence. I know. And I survived anyway. I heard him take a breath. Shaky. The breath of a man who was realizing too late how much he'd lost. I still love you, Jasmine. I know you do. But love isn't enough when you don't act on it. The call lasted 6 minutes and 33 seconds. When it ended, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, just peace. I didn't cut them off completely. I didn't block their numbers or burn bridges or declare that I would never speak to them again. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. But I stopped chasing. For 31 years, I had been the one who reached out. The one who showed up despite being treated like an afterthought. The one who kept trying, kept hoping, kept believing that someday they would see me. After the gala, I stopped. I let them come to me. And if they never did, if they chose their pride over their daughter, then that was an answer too. Christmas 2025 was the first holiday I didn't spend with my family. Aunt Marlene and I went to Maui instead. A week at a beachfront resort. We ate too much, drank too many Mai Tais, and watched the sunset every evening from our balcony. My mother sent a Christmas present. I sent it back unopened. Some people would say that's petty. Some people would say I should forgive and forget. Give them another chance. Be the bigger person. But here's what I've learned. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting continued mistreatment. Being the bigger person doesn't mean making yourself small enough to fit into someone else's expectations. I wasn't closing the door forever. I was just stopping holding it open for people who refused to walk through. In January 2026, I received an unexpected email. It was from Dr. Stephanie Brennan, the woman who had been at Thanksgiving. Vivian's colleague. One of the 14 people who had laughed at my mother's toast. One who wasn't good enough. The one who wasn't good enough. The one who got compared to a sibling who could do no wrong. I'm sorry I laughed at that toast. I was a coward. I didn't want to make waves. I told myself it wasn't my place. But watching you on that stage at the gala, hearing your story, I realized something. It's always our place. When we see someone being treated badly, it's always our place to speak up. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Not about Vivian, not about your mother, just about life. About what it's like to survive a family that didn't see you. You're remarkable, Jasmine. I hope you know that. Stephanie. I read the email twice. Then I wrote back, "Coffee?" She said yes. We met at a cafe in Scottsdale the following week. We talked for 3 hours. About families. About expectations. About the invisible wounds that successful people carry. Stephanie became one of my closest friends. Strange how the people who hurt you can sometimes lead you to the people who heal you. If you're still watching this, I want to tell you something. This story isn't about revenge. It's not about proving my family wrong, or watching them suffer or getting the last word. That might be satisfying for a moment, but it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't heal anything. This story is about freedom. For 31 years, I waited for my family to see me. I waited for my mother to be proud of something I did. I waited for my father to stand up for me. I waited for my sister to treat me like an equal instead of a liability. I waited and waited and waited, and they didn't. They couldn't. Or maybe they just wouldn't. But here's what I learned. I don't need their permission to exist. I don't need their approval to succeed. And I don't need their love to know that I'm worthy of it. The gala wasn't about humiliating my family. It was about stepping into the light, about letting the truth speak for itself, about standing on a stage in front of 600 strangers and claiming the success that I built with my own 2 hands, whether my family acknowledged it or not. They saw me that night. For the first time in my life, they really saw me. But by that point, it didn't matter, because I had already learned to see myself. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the other one in your family, the one they overlook, the one they underestimate, the one they call an embarrassment, I want you to know something. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't have to wait for them to change. You just have to live, build quietly, grow silently, and one day, when you're ready, Step into the light. They'll see you then. But by that point, it won't matter, because you'll already see yourself. I am not the embarrassment, I never was, and I never will be again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the invisible one in your family, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner? Would you have invited them to the gala? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. I've got more stories coming about boundaries, about family, about what it really means to build a life on your own terms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me.